Thank you so much for coming to the first annual Congressional Reason Reception to honor the use of reason in public policy and the Congressional Free Thought Caucus. I'm Nicole Carr, the Interim Executive Director of the American Humanist Association. For over 80 years, the AHA has proudly served as the leading progressive voice in the US on behalf of humanists, atheists, agnostics, and free thinkers, as well as been a longstanding leader in the fight for separation of religion and government. All of us, people of faith and of no faith, have gathered here today to celebrate the freedom of religion or belief that only a secular democracy affords. Because religion and government remain separate under the Constitution in the United States, peoples of all faiths and none are able to safely and freely practice and express their beliefs. Unfortunately, what we have seen in the state and federal legislatures, as well as in our judiciary, is the rapid spread of the imposition of theocratic ideals. When secular values are trampled upon, everyone, even those who belong to the dominant religion in government, are ultimately harmed. Christian nationalists and their allies are a dangerous threat, proliferating within the halls of our legislative and legal institutions. If they want to take away our civil liberties and human rights and be proud of it, then they should prepare for us to continue to be there every step of the way to stop them and ensure our society remains pluralistic. And although this is serious work, we're going to have some fun with it and recognize them for the wonderful work they've done to forward Christian nationalism. Tonight's event, which is not your typical DC event, is hosted by the AHA, Freedom from Religion Foundation, and the Secular Coalition for America.
I'm Laurie Gaylor with the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and Dan Barker is also here today. Dan, you want to wave? We're co-presidents of FFRF, and we're delighted to be here with you. The Freedom from Religion Foundation has over 40,000 non-religious members in North America, and we work to defend the constitutional principle of separation between state and church. I want to give you a little history lesson. A public law was passed in 1952 that declares the first Thursday in May to be the National Day of Prayer. The law reads, "The President shall set aside and proclaim a National Day of Prayer on which the people of the United States may turn to God in prayer and meditation in churches, in groups, and as individuals." Evangelist Billy Graham suggested the law in the midst of a DC revival, saying, "What a thrilling, glorious thing it would be to see the leaders of our country today kneeling before Almighty God in prayer." Senator Absalom Robertson, father of televangelist Pat Robertson, sponsored the legislation, and a Senate report was read into the Congressional record, citing as false rationale for the law that the framers of the Constitution prayed during the Constitutional Convention. In fact, they did not pray once in adopting our godless and entirely secular Constitution, and we're proud that FFRF corrected that historic record in a federal lawsuit. We won a federal court ruling in 2010 declaring this public law to be unconstitutional. District Judge Barbara Crabb ruled, "Recognizing the importance of prayer to many people does not mean that the government may enact a statute in support of it, any more than the government may encourage citizens to fast during the month of Ramadan, attend a synagogue, purify themselves in a sweat lodge, or practice rune magic." She observed that in this instance, the government has taken sides on a matter that must be left to individual conscience. Disappointingly, on appeal by the Obama administration, our suit was thrown out not on the merits, but on standing. Nevertheless, this law is unconstitutional, and that's why we're so grateful that every year Representative Jamie Raskin, Representative Jared Huffman, and other colleagues sponsor a resolution declaring May 4th to be the National Day of Reason. And it happens to fall on a Saturday this year, so that's why we're holding this event a little early. And we hope that a Reason reception to accompany the National Day of Reason will become an annual event. And we really appreciate your attendance here today and your support for separation of state and church. So thank you.
Good evening. I'm Stephen Emmert, the Executive Director of the Secular Coalition for America. SCA has been around for over 20 years, serving as the voice for advocacy and lobbying on behalf of the non-religious and supporting the separation of church and state. We represent over 20 member organizations, including AHA and FFRF among our members. We take our responsibility very seriously because in this historic time, our work has never been more important or more critical, as we see on a daily basis the rising threat of Christian nationalism and what it can mean for our democracy. I think I am not over-speaking in terms of saying that if this election is the most important election of our lifetime, and unbelievably, I'm quoting Liz Cheney here in a good way, but she said something to the effect of, if you don't, the policy doesn't matter as much in this election as our democracy. And those words ring so true as we listen to what some officials and some wannabe elected officials spew on a daily basis. And so it's critically important for our work, and we are so grateful for you all to be here tonight. It's going to be, hold on, I have a line here. We have a great lineup for you tonight, featuring awards and remarks from Senator Huffman and columnist and author Kate Cohen. Representative Huffman. So excited you're here, I can't read. So, you know, that's. And we also have for you tonight our MC, a powerhouse advocate for democracy. And let me introduce to you now, Doug Lindner. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Stephen, Annie, Nicole. Thank you to Senator Huffman, Congressman Cesar, all our host organizations, and all of you for being here, and those watching out in cyberspace. I am Doug Lindner, and I'll be your cruise director for this evening. Thank you for coming to the first annual Congressional Reason reception. I want to start by asking members and staff to raise your hands and be recognized for a second. Thank you especially for joining us on this very busy day in appropriations season. We've got a fun program coming up, and we won't keep you all too long, I promise. You know, in my day job, I work on democracy policy for a big environmental organization, which is already too many issues. And so when I was asked to speak here tonight, I hesitated. I thought about it, and I prayed. And something miraculous happened. It was a rainy day, but the gray skies parted over H Street. And from betwixt the clouds, a mighty pillar of fire descended from the heavens and touched down outside my window. And from the pillar of fire, I heard the deafening, ethereal voice of the Almighty God himself. The Lord spoke to me, and he said, "Thou shalt go forth and join thy friends in the mockery of Mike Johnson." And so here I am. I kid, of course, but Mike Johnson really does believe that God speaks to him personally, and that is big if true. Personally, I don't believe that any politician is having a two-way conversation with God, but even if Mike Johnson sincerely believes that, where is the humility? George W. Bush told us that God told him to invade Iraq, and folks, that was not good advice. But I suppose we should be thankful that Johnson and Bush only claim to talk with God, given that Donald Trump clearly thinks he is God. Which explains why he's selling $60 Bibles while he's on trial for hush money payments to porn stars. You know, traditional family values. I will say there are some things about the religious right that I find not relatable exactly, but at least understandable. Originalist judges, for example, not a fan of their jurisprudence, but I sort of get where they're coming from. I'm Jewish, and we Jews are what you might call Abrahamic originalists, because we don't believe in the New Testament. Meanwhile, Clarence Thomas is the other kind of originalist because he doesn't believe in the 14th Amendment. You need some cites for that one? I could provide them. Speaking of Clarence Thomas, I think that man doesn't get enough credit for how much he's taught us recently about the overwhelming power of friendship. Or at least the friendships of power. It inspires me to behold the incredible bonds he has somehow forged ever since he ascended to a lifetime seat on the highest court in the land. It's truly heartwarming stuff. What's really striking is the generosity that Clarence Thomas's friends have shown to the charities closest to his heart. Worthy causes such as Clarence Thomas's vacations and Clarence Thomas's nephew's private school tuition and Clarence Thomas's mother's house. Real salt of the earth, traditional morality from just wonderful friends like Charles Koch and Harlan Crow. As long as the traditions that underlie your morality come from Germany in the 1930s, like all that Nazi memorabilia at Harlan Crow's house, which Clarence Thomas likes to hang out at, I'm just saying. But enough about Clarence Thomas and his dear, dear friends. I want to turn to his partner in corruption that's somehow not a crime, Justice Samuel Alito, also known as Bargain Brand Scalia. This is a man who believes that life begins at conception, which is ironic given that his life began when he was grown in a Federalist Society lab to one day overturn Roe v. Wade. And that is the last thing Alito ever approved of any scientist doing. After Alito, Thomas, and the other MAGA justices overturned Roe v. Wade, Alito gave a televised speech in Rome, Italy, in which he, a sitting U.S. Supreme Court justice, publicly mocked the leaders of Britain, Canada, and France for their concerns about Alito's own rollback of human rights in the United States. Now, I don't know if Justice Alito ran that speech by the big man upstairs, but I'm quite certain he did not run it by the State Department. But it does make sense that Alito would go to Rome. Justices and popes actually have a lot in common. Popes are sovereign over Vatican City. Alito believes he is sovereign over the United States. Both believe life is sacred, but the Pope believes life continues to be sacred after the baby is born. Both claim to be infallible, but unlike Justice Alito, popes are occasionally open to reform. Justice Alito was nominated to the court the same year Pope Benedict XVI took office, but only one of them eventually retired. But all jokes aside, here is what the originalists and the Christian nationalists want us to forget. America's founders gave us the separation of church and state for a reason. Madison and Jefferson lived closer in time to the Mayflower than to us, and they knew the pilgrims who landed on Plymouth Rock had crossed a perilous ocean to a new world in search of a place to exercise their religion free from the tyranny of the official Church of England. But they also knew that when they got to the New World and built a colony on native land, the Puritans of Massachusetts created their own theocracy. The founders of Rhode Island established that colony because the Puritan leaders of Massachusetts had so little tolerance for Quakers, Baptists, and Anglicans. And this is not ancient history. This is American history. The founders understood the dangers of theocratic government. Of course they did. What if I told you that Benjamin Franklin was born just 13 years after the Salem witch trials? 13 years after the Salem witch trials. Think about how short a time that is. 13 years ago tonight, President Barack Obama announced that Navy SEALs had found and killed Osama bin Laden at a compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. You may have read about it on your iPhone 4 and gotten it first from Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who tweeted about it before Obama's announcement 13 years ago. And you know, killing Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind 9/11, that too is about defending the American people from religious extremism. Thank you again for coming. We've got a great program for you tonight. And now to present the Common Sense Award, given to someone who has stood up for democracy and political freedom, as well as the Age of Reason Award for someone who has stood up for reason, secularism, science, and church-state separation. It is my privilege to introduce one of the co-chairs of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, Congressman Jared Huffman.
All right, what a great looking group. And can I just say how cool it is that we are finally doing this event and that all of you are here and these great organizations are joining with the Free Thought Caucus as partners, and we're having some fun in the process of making some important statements. I want to thank you for that introduction, Doug. Thank you, Nicole, Carr, Laurie, Gaylor, Stephen Emmert, and all of these phenomenal organizations, all of you, for the work we do together. it is only fitting that we are holding the Reason reception on May 1st, because when it comes to threats to the constitutional separation of church and state, all of us are yelling, Mayday, Mayday. See, Doug, I can do a little. Yeah. Okay. But in all seriousness, when I founded the Congressional Free Thought Caucus with my friend Jamie Raskin 6 years ago now, along with a couple of other colleagues, I never dreamed how far this movement would come in 6 short years. Our caucus now includes 23 members of Congress. And I love the fact that it looks a lot like America. We have Christians and Jews, Muslims, Hindu, the one Buddhist in the Congress, one open non-believer, and a whole bunch of closeted non-believers. So it is really a reflection of the United States of America. It's a great place to talk about true religious freedom and religious diversity and separation of church and state. And with our support and leadership, and with work from many of you, President Biden recently updated the federal faith-based regulations to ensure that people from all backgrounds can participate in social services without fear of religious discrimination or exclusion. Several months ago, we coordinated the first ever session of a Democratic caucus retreat. We call it the Democratic Issues Conference, where actually the secular community had a seat at the table. Sarah Levin, who many of you know, was there, and we were fully included in a conversation about interfaith efforts. And I hope that's a precedent that we'll continue to build on. It was really well-attended panel at our caucus retreat, and it went quite well. Over the last couple of years, we've passed legislation in the House to shine a light on the military chaplain corps, to repeal Trump's Muslim ban, to call for the global repeal of blasphemy, heresy, and apostasy laws, and to authorize, this is a big one, a national memorial for Thomas Paine in the United States Capitol. Our sculptor is here in the front row, and he showed me a sneak peek of the incredible statue that we will soon be able to see. So that's very, very exciting. So 6 years ago, I really could not imagine how much we would accomplish in that short time, how many people we would bring in to this coalition, and the fact that we would now be having this counterweight to the National Prayer Breakfast. I think of it as kind of a boozy version of the National Prayer Breakfast. And I hope we can build it into just that in future years. But I'm also afraid to say that 6 years ago, if you'd told me some of the things we'd be struggling with right now, I probably would not be all that surprised. Even before the 2020 election, we were tuned in to the danger of Christian nationalism. Months before the January 6th insurrection, the Congressional Free Thought Caucus held the first event here in the Capitol on the danger of Christian nationalism. We had Catherine Stewart, a fantastic author who has written really the definitive book called The Power Worshippers on this subject. She warned us about this. Jamie Raskin and I were sufficiently concerned that we joined the Secular Coalition and others in a memo to the incoming Biden administration urging him to take this threat seriously as a national security threat. And after the attack, our Free Thought Caucus invited activists and scholars to brief members of Congress on the obvious role that Christian nationalism played on that terrible day in the insurrection. Soon after, I went to the floor of the House of Representatives and delivered the first speech ever decrying Christian nationalism and calling it out for being part of the January 6th insurrection. And none of this really would have surprised me 6 years ago because you could sort of see it all coming. I would not have been shocked if you had told me that Republicans in the House would go on to unanimously elect the biggest Christian nationalist that has ever held the speaker's gavel in the history of this country. That's where we are right now. And it's just been like a slow motion train wreck. We've all seen some of this coming. But 250 years ago, Thomas Paine and our founding fathers probably would also be shocked to hear how far we have strayed from the Enlightenment principles that they enshrined in our secular Constitution. Paine was so far ahead of his time, and his work still challenges us today to build a more just and democratic society. He not only inspired people in the colonies to overthrow the tyranny of faraway kings, but to launch a nation founded on principles of democratic self-government, the rights of men and of women, of reason and science. These are things that definitely inspire every one of us in this room tonight. And despite his pivotal role in the founding of our country, he really has been ghosted by history. Not just disrespected, but almost completely ghosted. And I think we all know why. It's because of his atheism. So there are many reasons to celebrate the rehabilitation of Thomas Paine in terms of this Congressional Reason event, where we're going to give out some awards in his name, and also the incredibly exciting monument that'll soon be coming to the United States Capitol. So we are proud tonight to present the inaugural Free Thought Awards in Thomas Paine's honor. These awards will recognize the brightest luminaries of Paine's legacy, and we're also going to call out one individual who exemplifies everything that Thomas Paine opposed. So for these awards, we took nominations from across Congress and throughout the secular movement, and then we asked members of the Free Thought Caucus to vote on the winners in each of these categories. So we are pleased to announce the inaugural winners, and to present this first award, I'm really delighted to bring up my colleague from Texas, a new member of Congress, and a brand new member of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, Congressman Greg Cesar.
Thank y'all. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for all of your incredibly hard work. I believe I got sent here from my constituents in Texas because we badly need help back home. And here at the federal level, fighting to make sure that we're working on inclusion and kindness and actually helping people and not relying on old theocratic ideas in order to bully people is really the fight that we are fighting in Texas. And I'm so proud to be able to be a member of the Free Thought Caucus alongside you, co-chair, and alongside each of you. So thank you so much for being here and hosting this event. Our caucus has the honor of providing the first ever inaugural Age of Reason Award, an award named after Thomas Paine's book on science and religion. And I'm so proud that our members voted overwhelmingly to give this award to a rising star in Texas politics. And I think he's watching here back home. Representative James Tallarico is a dear friend. He's a dear friend, a devout Christian working towards his master in divinity, and a staunch defender of secular governance. He is truly a theologian fighting against theocracy in Texas, and somebody that illustrates that he put his hand on the Bible and swore an oath to the Constitution, not the other way around. He has been a clarion voice for reason against Texas's onslaught to replace public school guidance counselors with chaplains, to deny people gender-affirming care, Texas's onslaught to require every public school classroom to display the 10 Commandments, and even worse and crazier proposals than those. His response to the 10 Commandments bill went viral when he stated, and I quote, "This bill to me is not only unconstitutional, it is not only un-American, it is deeply unchristian. I believe this bill is idolatrous. I believe it is exclusionary. I believe it is arrogant. And those three things in my reading of the gospel are diametrically opposed to the teachings of Jesus," he said to all of those other members of the committee. James is good. James is good. Thankfully, that bill was killed for now, but we couldn't have done it without Representative Tallarico fighting for the separation of church and state in the big pink granite dome that stands one story taller than the white dome here on purpose, I think. Representative Tallarico believes in secular government, but more than anything, he believes in kindness. And I want to just really say that here in Washington, D.C. Instead of using his position of power to pick on students, to pick on young people, to bully people, he thinks we should use it to fund our schools and to fund healthcare for all people. He knows that our moral imperative can be shared, regardless of who you are, or what you believe in, or where you come from. And he knows that the barefoot prophet of his faith preached caring for the poor, not picking on or pointing at vulnerable people as the source of all of our problems. So I'm pleased to present this award again for our theologian against theocracy in Texas, Representative James Tallarico. Thank you all so very much.
Congratulations, Representative Tallarico, and both of the recipients of the serious awards we're giving out tonight will get a nice congressional certificate from the Free Thought Caucus and also a really cool glass object of some kind that we are having engraved and custom made for the occasion. So congratulations. All right, I believe, someone correct me if I get the run of show wrong, but I think I am now going to introduce the second awardee, right? So this is the Common Sense Award. It is named after Paine's most famous work, which catalyzed the War of Independence. This is an award for the leading champion of democracy and political freedom. And I'm proud to offer this award to a man who's been described, I think quite aptly, as the closest person we have today to Martin Luther King Jr. This, of course, in a runaway victory in the voting that we had, is Reverend Dr. William J. Barber. Reverend Barber is president and senior lecturer of Repairers to the Breach, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, founding director of the Center for Public Theology and Public Policy at Yale Divinity School. He was pastor of Greenleaf Christian Church, Disciples of Christ in Goldsboro, North Carolina for 30 years until he stepped down to focus on advocacy and training future pastors. And for years, he has been an outspoken critic of Christian nationalism. He refers to it as a well-funded, coordinated political movement that has co-opted our faith, co-opted his faith tradition, and is exploiting so-called traditional values to undermine democracy and divide people across the land. Bishop Barber has led a fusion movement to address pardon me, I'm losing my vision here as I get older. There we go. The interlocking evils of systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation. I love the way he connects all of these things together. Militarism and the war economy and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism. What a beautiful statement by the Reverend Barber. He has loudly championed voting rights, criminal justice reform, reproductive freedom, LGBTQ plus equality, labor rights, and countless other causes to shore up democracy, and a national politics dedicated to caring for the poorest and most disenfranchised among us. It is my great honor to announce Bishop Barber as the winner of this Common Sense Award, and he too will receive the certificate and the cool object that we are creating for him. So thank you. All right. Now, I believe for the award that we're giving in jest, I am handing off. Am I right about that? All right. So Kate Cohen, right? You're next. Come on up. Okay. Thanks, everybody. This is the fun part now.
No more jokes, lower your expectations. No, I can't. Thank you, Congressman Huffman and Congressman Cesar. Briefly, our keynote speaker tonight is someone you read every month in the Washington Post, whose newest book is called We of Little Faith, Why I Stopped Pretending to Believe, and Maybe You Should Too. Kate Cohen lives on a farm in New York with her 3 kids and her husband, who's here today, along with her parents. She has a degree in comparative lit from Dartmouth. Soon after graduating, she wrote her first book, The Nepi Madonna Diaries, Reading Jewish Survival Through My Italian Family. She's an Emmy award-winning documentary scriptwriter, and her essays have appeared in Slate, Salon, BuzzFeed, Bustle, Vox, and even Fine Cooking. Please welcome Kate Cohen.
I will begin this evening by citing scripture. Thomas Paine wrote, "A long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it the superficial appearance of being right. Breaking that habit, convincing people to see something as wrong, is the first step toward making change. It is, I believe, at the heart of the protests on college campuses today. It is also part of my job as a columnist. I look for the things that appear right and ask whether we should be thinking them wrong instead. I told readers of the Washington Post that though I admired then presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg, I was leery of his use of religion even for a good cause, even to fight Christian bullies. I asked how exactly posting the 10 Commandments in schools would stop school shootings. No, really, how? I suggested that hospitals that receive public money should make medical decisions based on medicine, not on the Bible. I wondered, why do we keep giving churches a pass for discriminating against gay and trans people? Do we think they can't help it? I argued that it's wrong to grant a public school charter to a Catholic school, not just because it betrays the Constitution, but also because you can't teach Christian doctrine as fact and call it education, and so on. Yeah. You know, what should we call it? Common sense. I write about other topics for the Post. The Barbie movie, zombie laws, soup. But I do often return to the question of America's cultural, political, and judicial deference to religion because the general public persistently seems to think it right. And because I, as an atheist, have no trouble thinking it wrong. Other wrongs are harder for me to recognize. It takes a lot of reading or long discussions with my children, or more likely, like most people, most of the time, I fail altogether. But this wrong, to which we are acclimated, this elevation of religious belief over other kinds of belief, and of a particular religion over other kinds of religion, this increasing willingness to ignore our country's foundational dividing line between government and religion, it's pretty easy for me to spot. I was raised Jewish, but I never really believed that the God to whom I directed my dutiful prayers actually existed. I thought of him as a character in a book, a powerful, fascinating, messy character, no less, no more real than Oberon or Mr. Darcy or Harriet the Spy. When I heard public prayers as a Jewish kid, and I heard a lot growing up in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, I was always braced to hear Jesus invoked and relieved those few times when he was not. But it wasn't until I thought of myself as an atheist, much later when I started to raise my kids, that I realized any prayer to a higher power left me out, no matter how carefully crafted it was so as not to offend. Now, of course, we face a cadre of Christian nationalists who don't mind giving offense at all, who instead love to take offense at the suggestion that they might have to abide by, say, US labor or public health or non-discrimination laws. And because I think of God as a human creation, like Huck Finn, but less politically correct, when a judge cites God's image as a reason to ban IVF, or when state legislators invoke Almighty God in a law forcing people to give birth, or when a congressman insists that Israel be supported because of God's covenant with Abraham, my natural response is, what now? You're making law and deciding law and setting foreign policy based on your interpretation of a translation of the statements of a character in a book. It's fine if you want to live your life that way, but it's wrong. It's un-American to make me and my fellow citizens live our lives your way. Lots of us are non-believers, but even believers might have a different interpretation or a different translation or a different book. You don't have to be an atheist to think this. You can, as this caucus well knows, believe in God and belong to a congregation and fiercely advocate for the separation of church and state. Bishop Barber shows us that. But it's harder to trick your average atheist into believing that if we define religion broadly enough, if we refer to a God who is vague enough, we can make it okay to introduce religion into our secular democracy because we somehow included everyone. I mean, not those pesky Satanists, but everyone else. It's easier for atheists to see through that. We have the long habit of thinking a wrong thing wrong. I'll give you a small recent example. Much of the time, most of the time, almost all the time, I respond to my editor's suggestions with, "You're absolutely right," and "Good catch," or "My bad." But for an early draft of today's column on the National Day of Prayer, my editor questioned my use of the word coercion to describe how state-sanctioned religious speech affects citizens. Maybe coercion was too strong. Maybe I wanted something gentler. Nope. For years, I hid my own lack of belief because I was informed by no less an authority than the federal government that a citizen in good standing in this country trusts in God and believes the nation to be under God's protection. The weight of that rhetoric and congressional invitations, and "So help me God," and "God bless America" after every official speech kept me from saying what I believe. That rhetoric and the silence it created helped usher in this moment of astonishing attacks on our freedom. Freedom of mind and increasingly freedom of body too. And here I just want to note that today Florida's 6-week abortion ban went into effect, and to extend sympathy and fellowship to the people who will thereby be prevented from living their lives their way. I look forward to the ensuing election results. Now I try to say what I believe. And in my book, We of Little Faith, which I forgot to bring up with me, but here it is, I try to get other people to do the same. I don't ask believers to stop believing. I ask non-believers to be more vocal about not believing. If they already think God is a human invention, like Ahab, but less chill, they should, I think, call themselves atheists. They don't have to give up other cherished identities. They can still call themselves Jewish too, or Catholic or Baptist. One reader wrote to me that he's working on an autobiography called The Amish Atheist. I like that. More people speaking and thinking of themselves as atheists makes it easier for their neighbors and family and elected representatives and even themselves to call out coercion when they see it. More people thinking and speaking of themselves as atheists, more believers glimpsing the perspective of atheists, makes it easier for those who, like you, are defending the wall of separation between church and state. More people thinking religion in our government is wrong brings us closer to making things right. Will it work? I don't know. Thomas Paine wrote, "Time makes more converts than reason." Bit of an ego check for an opinion writer. On the other hand, he wrote that in the introduction to Common Sense, a 47-page triumph of reason that helped spark the American Revolution. So, time plus reason? I worry that even both won't be enough, especially with the Supreme Court now firmly stacked on the side of, hey, what if religious liberty meant the freedom to discriminate? Or what if we left pregnant people to the mercy of the well-organized religious right? We need help. We need a leader. We need someone to rouse the American people, all of us, believers and non-believers, to recognize that the intermingling of religion and government is a true threat to democracy and freedom. We need a unifying figure, a figure who can inspire a revolution. So I am pleased to announce that the Congressional Free Thought Caucus has one more award to bestow. The 2024 Award for Uncommon Nonsense recognizes the person who most violated church-state separation and betrayed the legacy of Thomas Paine. This year, it goes to a man who has said that God put him in the job to which American citizens elected him, that his position on every issue can be found in the Bible, that America is a Christian nation, and that separation of church and state is a misnomer. Believe it or not, this man had strong competition. Governors Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis, you've done impressive work. Oklahoma Superintendent of Schools Ryan Walters, I salute your efforts. But in a crowded field that includes Alabama Supreme Court Chief Justice Tom Parker, with an opinion citing God 40 times, there's still a clear winner. The man who said that every Christian should seek to bring industry, government, and society as whole under the sway of the principles of righteousness, my Speaker of the House and yours, Congressman Mike Johnson. Congressman Johnson, your efforts and your words are moving our cause forward faster than we ever imagined. Together, we can restore reason to its rightful place in American politics. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. That concludes our speaking program. Thank you all for coming. Please enjoy food and drinks and each other. And thank you for all you do for the rights, the equal rights of people of all religions and no religion.